I'm going to call the meeting to order of the Toledo Planning Commission on January 14th. And the first thing that we need to do is call to order and roll call. So do you want to do a verbal roll call, starting with Brian?
Brian Lindgren here.
Ann Ellis here. Cora Warfield here.
Dennis Sutherland here.
Okay. Moving on, then we need to do the approval of the November 12th minutes. Has everybody read the minutes, and does anybody want to move approval, or do you find anything that we need to talk about in there?
They look good to me. I'd move to approve.
Okay, Ann moves.
Second.
Brian will second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, that passes. Now it looks like what we're gonna move into is the training for the land.
There's visitor.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I passed over the visitor, didn't I? Okay, we have a visitor. Who's our?
Yeah, we have online folks, and I have one, Cynthia George, who's raised her hand. I'll go ahead and allow her to.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for giving me this time. We know we got a lot of issues in Toledo, and I've gone over your permits over the last year. And I personally am very concerned about the health of our waters in the city of Toledo. And I see we've got a lot of issues around the Port of Toledo, and that was brought up last night. And so this morning I saw that I live in the East District. I'm a taxpayer of the Special Taxing District. And somehow your planning department has approved a rental of a boat that has no hookup to sewer in an area, and I have the port dredging for what was put on to build that park. And so I hope you guys are on board finally and realize that we may have a deadly lead exposure in Toledo. And I've informed all the regulators, DEQ, GP is being investigated. They have failed so many times to even follow the 40 tons of toxins that they're putting into the air over to your housing development, that I've tried to raise this issue. And all I've done has been attacked by the mayor. In every meeting, it's all on tape. And so now we know that may actually be killing people. Okay. And so we got to get beyond we don't know anymore. I talked to the Public Works today, and I was asking him about that Ammon tank. I've been here doing this for a while, as you guys all know. And he says he has never been told of any history of lead in that tank. Now, we've asked for the inspections. He says there's divers that have been put down in there, that tank's been inspected. So we can go down, and I'm looking at all these GPS down to bore and aerial work on Butler Bridge. Would like to know what that is about. I would like to know what all this development in wetlands, we've got a whole bunch of permits in floodplains, DP placement of 3 temporary boilders, it says, not boilers nor boulders. So I don't know what that is in a wetlands floodplain. We've got at 1000 Altry Lane, Port is doing sewer in a floodplain. You've got once again, we've got an Ammon tank thing. So, and then we can go to the DEQ GSI solutions, those pins that are in the sidewalk. And is anybody letting anybody know what's going on with all of this? Because you just put the homie house across the street. Am I incorrect on that? Is that the homie house? So anyway, let's get back to that housing development. You guys just approved a $500,000 water project, and you're cutting open that Sturtevant Road that is 24 inches of concrete in a floodplain, in a toxic where that mill's been dumping. And you're in the low plain, is in a tsunami flood zone. You got the tsunami escape thing right there. It says get to high land right where you could, in between the apartment and getting out of there, right? So why are we putting children there when GP can't even follow the guidelines now? And so before we do anything, you would ask them, are you going to comply with the 2031 requirements? Are you getting ready to pull out and leaving us with a toxic dump? That would be my first question before I put any more children's health at risk. Because if it's true with the Bittler family and the E. coli, we got cattle running around all those leaking lines and all that. Come on, you guys. And I mean in this along Sturtevant cattle around leaking lines. Don't even have to go out to Mill Creek. We got to do better. And I've been asking and begging for years for answers. And everybody just keeps stonewalling me. And no more, because it's been turned over to everybody. So from here, if you guys go forward with that housing development, knowing GP is violating right now, and they've got violations that have not even gone on record yet. They're still, the woman says they're dumping stuff right now that is sprinkling out of the sky. What is going on over there? They trying to get rid of everything all at once?
Can I ask you a
Anyway,
question?
sure, please.
When you're
Please.
talking about the housing development, are you talking
Yes.
about the low income one on
Yes.
Sturtevant? That's what you're
Yes.
talking about?
Oh, absolutely. It's in a wetland mitigation site that is barely above the flood zone. That's a wetland mitigation site you guys got for the wetlands that you put the industrial area on. And so you guys got that. You had to bought that from Steinkolks, and now it says, oh, it was planned. And then you moved the lines. Anyway, I don't want it. I got film. I've got grandbabies in that school, and I've got films of that fog laying right over the school. I came and presented to the council. And what do I get? I get Rod Cross yelling at me at every meeting. Instead of working, and here's the sick part about all this, you guys. If filters and a UV light could save people's lives and kept us from being exposed to lead all these years and UV light to the E. coli bacteria, we could have done that under our sinks. 20 years I've been asking for testing. The hospital won't even work. Oh, I called the hospital. They refused to see me, and I'm symptomatic for lead poisoning. I have had diarrhea for 5 years. They don't care here because GP owns all of you. So that's all I got to say tonight. All right. I
Okay,
don't mean to be mean. It's the truth. And
okay,
people
well,
need to start listening.
thank you,
Thank you, you guys.
for your
Let's do this
input.
together. We could be protecting people tomorrow. That $110 fine or $110,000 fine GP paid and gave it to Celeste, and Willie Warman works at DP, okay? And he's the mayor. And they gave $110,000 to the city of Celeste instead of protecting our children and our families. $110,000 would have bought a lot of filters and lights. You see what I'm saying? Testing, that's all I wanted was them to monitor the schools. 110,000, and they got more fines coming. And you know what they did? Oh, get this. You know what they did with the last fine? that when they dumped in the wetlands, they gave us a UV charger at the library instead of testing those wells they dumped around. And then they advertise it in the hill, whatever, the Millbilly boat.
Okay, Cynthia, I think you've reached your time here,
Thank you,
but
but it's
thank
not
you.
okay.
Thank you for your input.
You bet.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Did we have any other?
I have one other
concerns?
online. If Angelina Polster wants to speak, go ahead and raise your hand electronically.
Okay,
I don't see anything.
okay. So does that cover all of the visitors, or possible visitors? Okay. Okay. Okay, so then we can move on then to the training.
Thank you, and I'll do a quick introduction and then we can jump right into the training. So you'll actually hear less from me today, but we invited some of our partners, Brett from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and I'm sure you can I'll let you give a longer intro here after I introduce Dan, and then Dan from Oregon Cascades West Council of Governments, who worked for many years in Staten. But maybe Dan, if you want to do a quick intro, and then Brett, and then we can go from there on the training.
Sure. Thank you. Hello, Planning Commissioners. My name is Dan Fleischman. I'm currently a very part-time planner with the Council of Governments. Prior to that, for the past 17 years, I was the planning director in Staten. And prior to that, my career started as both a local and regional planner in the state of Maine. I've been doing planning commission trainings for 30 plus years, and glad to be here and offer some of this session to you this evening.
And good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Brett Estes, and I am the North Coast Regional Representative for the Department of Land Conservation and Development. And my agency, DLCD, is the planning arm of the state. And whenever y'all are reviewing any zone changes or comprehensive plans, I'm taking a look at them, and if we have any questions in terms of how that is fitting in with the statewide planning goals, which I'll be talking about in a little bit. We're working with your staff and discussing with them. And there are times when we provided grants to the city, and there's been several projects, code updates that y'all have taken on, particularly over this past year that we funded. And before coming to the department about 3.5 years ago, I was up in Astoria and worked for the city of Astoria for 16 years before coming over to DLCD. So thank you for having us tonight.
And Dan, if you want to share the slides. And I can maybe kick off on the first couple slides here, but just a general agenda for the meeting. So we'll kind of split it where Brett will take the first half of the presentation and then Dan will take the second half of the presentation. But Brett will kind of focus on the land use planning framework in Oregon. And then I guess all the rest of those bullets are what Dan will kind of jump in on in terms of land use decisions, application process, planning commissioner and city councilor responsibilities, legal issues, wrap up, and then adjourning. But we do have a good amount of slides, so it'll take some some time to get through them today. If there are questions, we can try to break them up at the end of Brett's presentation and then at the end of Dan's presentation. But if there's something that immediately comes up, feel free to raise your hand, but we'll try to break them up to the end of the presentations. And then you can jump, oh, you did jump to the next slide. So yeah, again, we haven't had a training with planning commission members probably in about 2 years. I think many of you have been on planning commission now for at least 2 years or longer in most cases. So we wanted to kind of bring this back as kind of another orientation for kind of, we don't really have any new members, but to kind of reorient the long-term members. And then giving those land use issues in terms of an overview and time to ask questions and also share ideas at the end. I will pass it to Brett.
Okay, Dan, I'm gonna, since you're gonna be driving the PowerPoint, I'll tell you next whenever to adjust. So again, Brett Estes with the Department of Land Conservation Development, and I'm gonna kick it off and give a little bit of history as to the Oregon land use system, and then talk a little bit about the statewide planning goals and kind of how things work from the state level coming down to local jurisdictions like the city of Toledo. And as Justin said, if there's some immediate questions along the way, feel free to just let me know, and I'll be glad to do that. And we'll take a pause before we transition over to Dan's part of the presentation. So in looking at the current day modern framework of land use planning in the state, everything really kind of got started with regards to zoning around 1919 in the state of Oregon. And that's when the legislature allowed cities to create zoning districts for areas within their boundaries. And at that time, it was pretty basic, taking a look at maybe looking at industrial areas, commercial areas, residential areas, pretty straightforward. And things got more complicated and more detailed over time. But the start of everything was in 1919. And then in 47, the legislature then extended those powers to counties. And I'll let you know that in jurisdictions across the United States, not all cities have zoning. And it's in some locations, the legislatures may allow cities to have zoning, but not counties. So, but in Oregon, both cities and counties have zoning ordinances and their comprehensive plans. In 1963, there's a piece of legislation which was passed, which created the exclusive farm use, or EFU zone. And this is the beginning of where there was interest in trying to protect farm and forest lands in the state. This was created as a feature, and the legislature said that's something that they wanted to try and provide some protections towards. And Dan, next slide. So in 1973, Senate Bill 100 was passed, which created the Land Conservation and Development Commission, or LCDC, and the legislature charged LCDC with adopting statewide planning goals, which would apply to cities and counties across Oregon. And by 1975, the first 14 goals were created and adopted. And then by 1976, goals up to number 19 were adopted, the last being coastal resource zones. There's a whole set of goals we'll get into a little bit later on to kind of show you the whole list of all the different topics that we have under statewide planning goals. Now, after the Land Conservation and Development Commission adopted the goals, cities and counties were charged to create comprehensive plans which were in conformance with the applicable statewide planning goals for their jurisdiction. And so if you go and take a look at the city of Toledo's comprehensive plan, it's going to follow the whole set of statewide planning goals that were established. And there was a whole process where every city and county's comprehensive plan was acknowledged. And that work happened between 1976 and 1986, where the Land Conservation Development Commission reviewed every comprehensive plan for every city and county within Oregon during that 10-year period. So something else to add on to that is in 1977, the Oregon Coastal Management Program was created, and this was in partnership with the federal government, where NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, was looking at ways to be able to have certain protections if there are any federal permits or federal agencies that are doing permits, that there is a review done at the state level to ensure that the actions being taken by the federal government are in conformance with not only local zoning ordinances, but also statewide activities. And so this would apply along your waterfront in Toledo, where there is this additional review that happens via the Coastal Management Program. And the Department of Land Conservation Development, my division, is the one that takes a look at these types of activities. Next slide. So I want to kind of go through the statewide planning goals, and I won't read every one, but I'll kind of highlight different goals, which again are going to be the basis of the Toledo Comprehensive Plan. The first goal is citizen involvement, and goal one being citizen involvement being the first. It was first because of the importance that was placed on trying to include and involve the community, include the public within the decision-making processes, and having the whole set of steps, of review for permits through planning commissions and any changes from planning commission to city council. Goal two, land use planning, deals with the framework in which you make all of your decisions here as a set of planning commissioners. Moving down, agricultural lands, goal three. Goal four is forest. Next slide. 5 is dealing with natural resources, scenic and historic areas. So this is dealing with things like everything from wetlands to historic preservation, environmental protections is all goal 5. With the historic areas and open space being kind of included in that whole list of items in this goal. 6 is air, water, and land resource quality. 7 is natural hazards. 8 is recreation. 9 is economic development. Economic development gets into whenever you're looking at not only industrial lands, but commercial zones. We call them employment lands. And there are documents which are called economic opportunities analysis that every community has, which really looks at how much land is needed for employment lands, for jobs within a community. And if there's ever a zone change that you'll be considering to rezone a commercial or industrial zone property to another one that is not one of those types of employment land zones, then there's a finding that needs to be made to say, hey, we have enough land to have a stable economy within our community. And that's one of the findings that would need to be addressed to be able to deal with goal 9. Goal 10 is housing, and Toledo has done a whole lot of goal 10 work recently, amending your codes for your housing codes, your zoning ordinances, to be able to address housing issues within your community. And there's been quite a focus at the state level over the past few years at the legislature in terms of trying to address the housing crisis and to address Goal 10 issues. Next slide. So Goal 11, public facilities and services. So this is looking at your plans dealing with public works related issues, making sure that the planning that you're doing for residential development or commercial development, that there's adequate sewer and water, while there's separate public works types of plans. This is more of a planning function to make sure that there isn't a conflict if you're planning for a certain amount of development in the area, that you're going to look at working towards having an adequate amount of resources through your utilities to be able to serve those needs. Goal 12 is transportation. So when's the last time you've done a transportation system plan update?
2013 or 14, somewhere.
Okay, 2013, 14. So a transportation system plan is what is done by communities to address Goal 12, or one aspect of Goal 12, and it's looking at what are the needs for vehicular traffic, for freight traffic, for pedestrians, for bicycles. And a transportation system plan will have a set of projects that will be adopted. And it sounds like 2013, 2014 is when your last transportation system plan was adopted. That's pretty normal usually those documents have a 20, 25-year lifespan whenever you're looking at needing to update what's called a transportation system plan. Urbanization, Goal 14, is looking at how does land within the periphery of a city transition to urban, if there's a need to amend your urban growth boundary, which is the boundary in which development can occur around the city of Toledo. Every city has an urban growth boundary within the state. If there's a need to adjust it, that's looked at through Goal 14. Goal 15 deals with the Willamette Greenway. We don't have that. That goal is not applicable here in Toledo. Let's go to the next slide, Dan. Goal 16 is getting into the coastal goals. So estuarine resources, this is Goal 16 is applicable here in Toledo because you have tidal influenced estuary areas here along your waterfront. And along with Goal 16, there's looking at protections, but there's also the issue of working waterfronts like you have here in Toledo, and because there's certain characteristics where many times when you have waterfront type of industrial or water dependent type of uses, those are happening within the estuarine areas. And so this goal is dealing with not only protections, but also it's looking at areas where development can occur. There was the Yaquena Estuary Management Plan, which was wrapped up about a couple of years ago. And there were a number of meetings which were held all throughout the different jurisdictions which are along Yaquena Bay. And one of them was held here in this room. And that estuary management plan is really focused on Goal 16. And I don't know if any of y'all were able to attend those, because that's been about a couple of years ago now when that's.
I attended a couple of those. I hate to say this, I shouldn't say this out loud, but I felt like it was so beyond me. Only because when you talk about estuary, the different things that were coming up, I thought, it just seems so foreign.
Yeah, I will tell
About that.
I'll tell you that it is exceedingly complex
Yeah, well-
set of science, and you're not alone. I mean, honestly, I mean it's a very complex type of issue, and estuary management plans. One of the things that I think that if you were to take a look at the prior plan and compare it to the new one, if you dug into it, the new one's going to be, I'm going to say, easier to understand than the old one, because the old one was drawn with I'm going to call them cartoon maps. I mean, hand drawn. Everything now is getting more digitized, where you can say, okay, here is a better example of where a boundary of the estuary begins and where it ends. And that was part of the goal about this update, was to have better information that was easier for staff, the public, and you as decision makers, if you ever have a permit to be able to respond to be able to work through.
Yeah, and we, Lincoln County, I'm not sure their timeline on, so the plan was completed.
Right.
And then Lincoln, I think Newport completed their adoption process, but Lincoln County was still working through the actual adoption in the code. So that is something that will have to come back to City of Toledo as well. We were kind of waiting to piggyback with the county and do it simultaneously. But it is, as Brett was just talking about and what you noted, Cora, it's very complex. So it's taken a lot of time to kind of.
And so that's
close the
something
loop.
that when it comes to us, then we as the planning commission for Toledo
Mhm.
have to approve that right along with like
Or-
the county. and-
Yeah, so with that, because like I was saying before, because the estuary spans over unincorporated Lincoln County, City of Toledo, and City of Newport, all three jurisdictions have to adopt the estuary management plan, and the county is technically the holder of the estuary management plan for all the jurisdictions. Newport went ahead and moved forward with adopting theirs because they had some projects that they were wanting to be able to get wrapped up. But really Newport could have chosen to wait, like Toledo is doing, because then it's going to, whenever the county is going through their adoption process, that will come to you as well. And it's going to be kind of happening simultaneously. And there's I'm going to say some economies of scale where the staff from my agency will be coming and talking with you, some of the specialists about that. And the thing is they really need to match between all the different jurisdictions. And that's sometimes a challenge whenever you're dealing with 3 planning commissions, 3 city councils, or a county commission in this case. So more to come, but you will be seeing that estuary management plan whenever the county gets all of their final documents, put together. So.
I'll actually kind of be glad to see it. I think it'll be kind of interesting, yeah.
So keeping on with the coastal goals, there's coastal shorelands. Coastal shorelands are really kind of the periphery of where estuaries transition over to beaches. And Dan, next slide. That's got it. Okay. And then I wanted to, this was a slide that Dan had used in his deck, and I incorporated it over here to really kind of give kind of an example of what happens whenever you have a specific goal. And so this is language out of Oregon Administrative Rules for Goal 12 for transportation. And you can see that there's the specific goal, but along with that is more detailed language that goes into more specificity and more sets of rules that implement the goal. And so if there are any changes to any of the rules that implement a goal, that is done by the Land Conservation and Development Commission, or LCDC. I'll talk a little bit more about LCDC moving forward, but this was just a good example that Dan had that kind of shows there's more to it than just the statewide planning goal language itself. There's actually rule language that implements those goals at the state level. Okay, let's keep on going. So over the years, there's been more and more focus about trying to include more people in the decision-making process, and that's been a focus of the state to be able to, whenever there's any public involvement, to include more voices in the decision-making process. And you see that whenever there's any grants that are coming forward from DLCD, more of a push to be able to hear more voices, through your adoption process. Next slide. This is kind of a graphic which is going to kind of talk a little bit about how the statewide planning goals and other statewide rules or statutes really kind of fit into your decision-making process. So we talked about the statewide planning goals a little bit earlier, and then you're also going to have Oregon Revised Statutes, ORSs. Those are really coming from legislation which has been passed by the legislature. And you have, at the top, you have the statewide planning rules, which were adopted by Land Conservation Development Commission. And then you have the legislation, which turns into Oregon Administrative Rules, Oregon Revised Statutes. To implement both the goals and Oregon Revised Statutes, they're Oregon Administrative Rules. And those rules for land use issues are adopted by the Land Conservation and Development Commission. And again, this is where you have more specificity about actions that maybe a local jurisdiction has to address. And there may be times when legislation is passed and then they defer rulemaking to the Land Conservation and Development Commission to flesh out the details. The legislature may say, this is what we want, and we're wanting Land Conservation and Development Commission to really flesh it out more. Those are your Oregon administrative rules. Now, at the local level, you have your comprehensive plan, which incorporates the statewide planning goals, the Oregon Revised Statutes, and the Oregon administrative rules. And then your local ordinances, like your zoning ordinance, implement everything, funneling back up. And then that's how you make your local decisions as planning commissioners or staff making their decision. And it's all tied together in this whole way, from the legislature or from the statewide planning goals, funneling all the way down to your local zoning ordinance. Next slide. So Dan, there's a whole lot of kind of just let's just keep on going. So with this, I want to talk a little bit about responsibilities from the state. And again, the Department of Land Conservation and Development is the state land use agency. And then our governing board is Land Conservation and Development Commission. People get confused about DLCD or LCDC. DLCD is the agency, LCDC, Land Conservation Development Commission, is the agent, is the board. Think of LCDC as the planning commission for the state, if you want to think of it that way. They are appointed individuals, and they have terms, and they get to go through the process of setting the rules that ultimately our land use system is based upon. So again, DLCD and LCDC sets the land use policy, those goals, those land use planning goals, and the corresponding rules. And we acknowledge city and county plans. We talked about a little bit earlier about that 10-year period that all city and county plans were acknowledged in the 70s and 80s. There's a process now, if you amend your code or your comprehensive plan, we re-acknowledge it. And that's the active process we continue to work through. We enforce the land use planning goals, and we enforce them is if you have a code amendment, and let's say there's a disagreement in terms of how the city's code amendment may address a statewide planning goal, that's where I would be working with your staff. And if there's a difference of opinion, then you see me participating at a planning commission meeting. The thing is the Department of Land Conservation Development does not have the ability to stop a process done at a local level. But what it does is if we had a difference of opinion and we testified, then there would be the ability for DLCD to appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals if there was a difference of opinion. But DLC doesn't have the ability to say stop. It's there's not an automatic hold button that the state gets to push when you're going through your decision-making process. So again, we review those plan amendments. So now there used to be something called periodic reviews, and Dan, go to the next one. But periodic reviews are not happening any longer because of the price it costs local jurisdictions and the price it costs for the department. But there are jurisdictions that do voluntary periodic reviews. And what this was think of it as like an audit of your comprehensive plan, your code, to make sure they're fully compliant with all of the legislation which has been passed since the last time it has been updated and all the rule changes. It's not something that's mandated any longer, but it's something that some jurisdictions choose to do. Then we provide technical assistance through grants, and then also through myself as the regional representative, being able to, if there are any technical questions that come up, your staff is able to, or anyone's able to call, citizens call, and ask questions about application of the statewide land use system at the local level. Okay, now let's move on to responsibilities of cities and counties. So you adopt your plans and your codes in compliance with the statewide planning goals that we talked about earlier, but this is where you address your local vision and your needs as a city, where you have your flavor of your community, which is embedded within your codes or your comprehensive plan. You make the land use decisions as planning commissioners and as staff does in their review. You enforce your own codes and your ordinances. It is interesting. There's sometimes where citizens sometimes call the regional reps like myself, and they may have a difference of opinion in a local decision-making process, and they ask us to be able to go and tell the jurisdiction that they need to do something differently. What I let the citizens know is that we don't have that ability. The decision-making process is done at the local level. We're there to help, and a lot of times I'm kind of talking through the issue with the person helping, trying to explain the situation. But the department doesn't have the ability to go and review. We always have the ability to participate in a process, but all decision-making processes are done at the local level. And then go through appeals processes up to planning commission, city council, and they're on up. And then you provide the assistance to your general public. Let's go to the next slide. So like with goal 2, we talked about goal 2, where you're required to have a comprehensive plan and ordinances like zoning ordinances that implement the policies. But let's go through now the next set of slides about what is a comprehensive plan. So your comprehensive plan is your overarching local land use document that establishes the vision for your community. And it is the overarching or guiding document that is used by the city of Toledo in working through land use matters, because your zoning ordinance is in conformance with your comprehensive plan. And it has all of the different sections, like we were talking about earlier, with the different land use planning goals dealing with infrastructure, conservation of natural resources, employment lands, housing, etc. So with a comp plan, you have your factual base, goals, policies, and implementation measures, and zoning maps. This is consistent for comprehensive plans across the state. One thing to kind of always think about is city and county plans must be consistent with one another where your boundaries touch, because they're the adjacencies between what's happening in unincorporated Lincoln County and in Toledo. And so those things are looked at whenever you're updating your respective plans. Let's go to the next slide. So with goal 2, are you stuck with what you've got? The answer is no. We talked about acknowledgement of comprehensive plans a little bit earlier. And if you want to change your comprehensive plan, you can do what's called a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, referred to as a PAPA. And this is where you can amend your comprehensive plan. Maybe there's something which needs to be updated to comply with current law or rule or statute. Or maybe there's something about your comprehensive plan which is out of date and it's no longer reflective of your community, and you need to update that to freshen it up. And that's something that you can bring forward and go through the process of planning commission reviewing and making recommendations to council for adoption to amend your comprehensive plan. DLCD would be noticed in advance, and typically we would know if you're going to be doing these things. Just Justin would be and Arlene would be letting me know that, hey, we're working on this. So that if there were any concerns, we could work them out in advance. And then, we're just always trying to make sure that it's compliant with the statewide planning rules. And if there were issues, to work through those, hopefully before you get to your planning commission hearings. So let's go to the next slide. If there is the ability for what's called exceptions to be granted if there's a statewide planning goal that doesn't quite fit or make sense. I'll tell you that most of this times is more applicable for natural resource types of issues. Counties deal with exceptions more than cities do. And it's if there is an on-the-ground situation or circumstance that just doesn't fit the statewide planning rule, local jurisdictions can apply for an exception and embed that in their comprehensive plan. Think of it as kind of like a variance to a statewide planning rule if something just does not apply or is so applicable in a certain area. When I worked for the city of Astoria for my 16 years, there were no exceptions. I was with the city of Hillsborough before that. Now I see that there are some that happen here and there, but for jurisdictions that are cities, very rarely do you see an exception. Next slide. So zoning ordinances, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where your specific regulations are included to implement your comprehensive plans, where you have regulations like setbacks, height provisions, densities. It has your review criteria for your decision-making processes, and it has the procedures for your different activities that you will take as planning commissioners or your staff will take. Next slide. So, these are some other Oregon administrative rules. These are, again, the more specificity with regards to implementing statewide planning goals. One OAR that I want to just highlight is 660030. This is where it says that state agencies need to make sure that their provisions are also in compliance with the statewide planning rules. So like ODOT, DEQ, all of those, that there's a whole process whereby there's coordination between other state agencies, something to just be aware of. Last slide, I want to talk a little bit about LUBA, or Land Use Board of Appeals. I mentioned that earlier. This is kind of a unique situation for the state of Oregon. LUBA is essentially a court that focuses on land use matters and land use matters only. And so if there was a project that went to planning commission, and let's say it was appealed to city council made a decision, parties who participated in the process could appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. And that's where the case would be heard after it would leave the city council on appeal. I'll say that it's pretty quick in terms of the decision-making process, meaning 6 months is actually pretty quick. Before I came to Oregon, I started my career in Texas. And if there was an appeal that was done by a city council decision, it went to the county court system and it went into dockets with everything else. So alongside every other type of court case, so you're looking at a year or two before something would hit a docket. So much faster system here, and these folks are specialized in land use matters, and so they're able to be pretty up to date on terms of statewide planning rule law and so forth. But just something to just be aware of, that this what LUBA, or Land Use Board of Appeals, is. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dan and let him take over unless there are any questions from you all. Okay, Dan.
I'm not hearing any, so I'll jump right in. Thanks, Brett. So while Brett sort of just went through the framework, I'm going to focus more on the specifics and the implementation of how this all really works. So you as a city, and not exactly just the planning commission, but you're dealing with three basic types of land use decisions. In Toledo's code, you actually talk about, I think it's 4 types, type 1 through 4, but they are type 1 in your code are ministerial. They're handled by staff. There's no public process. The staff, gets out the ruler and says, yes, the setback is met, you're approved, type thing. Then there's quasi-judicial decisions, and those are what your code refers to as type 2 and type 3. Type 2 are handled by staff, and type 3 come to the planning commission and or the city council. And quasi-judicial decisions are when you are dealing with an application that you need to determine a certain set of facts and apply the law, the policies, the approval criteria that are in the municipal code. And you need to determine whether the application meets those criteria or not based on the facts that are in the record. And then lastly are legislative decisions, which are decisions that are the establishment of the rules or the establishment of policy or the amendment of policy. And those always end up being a city council decision because they are the legislative body. So again, ministerial decisions involve little or no discretion on the part of the decision maker, typically over the counter. Examples are building permits, sign permits, perhaps a change of use permit if your city requires one. We had that type of permit in Staten where I worked, where if a retail establishment went out of business and that space was going to be converted to office space, then that would be a change of use. Um, Again, quasi judicial decisions are think of what a judge does. A set of facts are presented. The judge looks at the law, determines to what extent the facts fall within the purview of the law. That's what you do when you're reviewing a subdivision proposal or a variance or a site plan review, or staff does if they're the decision maker. Look at the facts presented in the application, or also presented by other participants in the process. You are applying the policies and the standards in the code and determining whether those standards are met. And finally, the legislative decision is where the council is establishing policy either through the adoption or amendment of your plan or your code or master plans for sewer, water, et cetera, that really are adopted as part of the comprehensive plan. Again, for ministerial decisions, typically it's either the zoning or building official or planning staff that approves or denies. For some of those types of decisions, the planning commission might be designated as an appeals body if the applicant is denied or if a neighbor is concerned about an approval. Legislative decisions, the planning commission's role is usually to review it and make a recommendation to the council that adopts it. And quasi judicial decisions, the planning commission is sometimes in the role of making a recommendation to council. Those would be annexations, comprehensive plan and zone map amendments, or a comprehensive plan text amendment, or in other times is designated as the decision maker for a conditional use or variance. In many cities, land divisions, I know you just recently amended your code to make some land divisions staff review and some come to the planning commission, and other types of site plan or development review processes. Again, the level of what is handled by staff and planning commission varies from city to city. The application process involves a number of different parties, the applicant, staff. Usually staff consults with public works staff / city engineer. Occasionally the city attorney needs to be consulted. Typically cities reach out to other agencies, the county public works or county planning, the private utilities, ODOT, school district, if you have one, a parks district. Oh, you've got the port. Typically, they would all be notified that an application has been received and invited to submit their review comments. And that's part of that interagency coordination that Brett talked about as far as making sure that plans are consistent, not just among the various jurisdictions. And then finally, the planning commission and city council all have a part in the process. So just using a subdivision as an example, the applicant's responsibilities are to complete the application form, prepare a preliminary subdivision plan that shows all the existing buildings, utilities, drainage, etc. Usually includes a vicinity map so that you know what part of the city it's in and what's nearby, and provide some type of narrative explaining their proposal and perhaps additional reports from consultants, geotech, wetland, uh, uh, civil engineering for sewer, water, stormwater, erosion control, etc. That information is all submitted to the planning department. You've got a mandatory pre-application meeting before that happens so that everybody understands what's required for the process, what needs to be submitted, etc. Once the application's submitted, staff reviews it to make sure it's complete. There's a written a requirement to provide written notification if the application's not complete and what information is required in order for it to be complete. Everything goes into a file. If there's a public hearing or a public process, notice is sent to the adjacent property owners. I don't know whether this is left from my previous presentations or whether Toledo requires a sign on the property. Many cities do to notify people who are going by that, hey, something's going to be happening here. Again, as I mentioned before, the notices go out to the other agencies, the utilities, the county, etc. Information goes to Public Works and the city engineer. And state law requires that the staff report and draft decision be available to the applicant and to the public 7 days prior to any hearing.
Just one quick comment, Dan. In the city of Toledo, there's nothing in our code for a sign on the property, but you're right that
Okay.
it is common for other cities. Yeah.
Yeah. That must be left over from when I originally wrote this for the State and Planning Commission. And staff prepares a draft order or notice of decision for consideration by the Planning Commission at their meeting. Other city staff, Public Works / city engineer, usually are at that pre-application meeting, prepare a report to the city. They commenting on any of the preliminary engineering plans, and then after approval, during construction, would be carrying out inspections. Occasionally, things come up. We need to consult with the city attorney, who would be providing legal advice if needed, perhaps attending the public hearing. Usually, if there's an appeal, would be attending that hearing and reviews notices of decision, conditions of approval if needed. And then if there was an appeal to LUBA, it would be the city attorney participating in the LUBA appeal. So the other agencies are usually provided 20 days notice prior to a hearing. They may testify at the hearing or provide written comment prior. State agencies, DEQ or DS, the Department of State Lands, have review authority over certain types of activities, or for along US 20, ODOT has jurisdiction, and communication back and forth with city staff and the applicant's consultants. Finally, Planning Commission's role is to hold a public hearing, ask your questions of the applicants and staff and other participants, deliberate on the application and make a decision. State law requires that the city's final decision, including any appeals to this from the original decision maker, be completed within 120 days of the application being determined to be complete. A few years ago, that 120-day rule was modified to shorten it for family housing that is to low and middle income families. So just to try to speed that process up, cities have only 100 days for those types of projects. So that's not 120 days for the Planning Commission decision, but needs to include any possible appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to the City Council. And then finally, you need to vote and be prepared to explain the rationale behind your vote one way or the other. In Toledo, the City Council is the decision authority for Type 4 permits, annexations, code amendments, map amendments, and serves as the appeals body for your decisions as the Planning Commission. State law requires that at any land use hearing, that a statement is made to the audience, the participants at the hearing, that contains certain information. Again, in Staten, where I was for many years, we actually had a written form that we put out at a table at the back of the hearing room. And prior to every hearing, the Planning Commission chair read the opening statement as well. It needs to state what the criteria for approval for the application are, that the burden of proof lies with the applicant, that testimony needs to address the criteria for approval, and that I guess I thought I had more, that the basis for any appeal needs to be brought up at the hearing. So the LUBA rules prohibit someone from bringing up an issue on appeal that was not brought up before the original decision maker with enough specificity so that the decision makers can respond, and the applicant can respond to those concerns. So it's the raise it or waive it is what my former city attorney was fond of saying, that if you don't bring up an issue at a hearing, then you can't bring up that issue later on on appeal. Again, hearing procedures. I think from consulting with Justin that this is how you all run your hearings. You have the introduction with opening statement. Planning commissioners need to declare any ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, or bias. And I'll get into each of those in more detail in a little while. The applicant's presentation of the application, staff report, opportunity for questions from the planning commission of the applicant or staff. And then the floor is open to the public for usually proponents, anybody who wants to support the application. My experience is there's never anybody in the room that wants to do that other than the applicant. And then opponents' testimony, and then general testimony of people who have things to say that are neither for nor against, but have the urge to speak. Again, more opportunity for questions, clarifying questions from the planning commission. Applicants given an opportunity for a summary, a staff summary, and then either the public hearing can be continued, and state law requires that if the applicant requests a continuance, that you are obligated to grant it. Or you close the public hearing. That's the end of any public testimony. You begin your discussions and deliberations and reach your decision, either approving with conditions, or denying the application, or continuing your discussion to a specific date and time. Your decisions must be in writing and are known as an order. And they consist of three basic parts: findings of fact, conclusions of law, and your decision. So you need to recite what are the facts that you relied on in making the decision. What were your conclusions regarding how those facts address the criteria for approval? And then based on those conclusions, deny, approve, or approve with conditions. As I stated earlier, you need to identify what the criteria are in advance of making your decision. And it's in your land use code, your zoning code, your development code, and the comprehensive plan that have the policies and the standards that are used to judge a development proposal. So starting with in more detail, findings of fact, they're found in the application. The staff report, I know that my staff reports would sometimes include information that was not in the application, but was available from city records, or just background information on the sewer and water lines that were surrounding the property in question, etc., and any testimony that's presented. Again, typically, testimony from the public, usually my experience is doesn't provide a lot of facts. It's more of, we don't like this, we don't want this to happen, without really addressing the criteria. But occasionally you will get public testimony that provide you with information that needs to be reflected in your findings of fact. The order should identify each criterion and the facts that relate to it. And really, it would be great during your deliberations, you reiterate what some of the important facts that sway your decision are, and that can be reflected in the minutes of the meeting, in addition to being articulated in the order of approval. Just as some examples, I don't know to what extent you can read the screen that's in front of you, but just laying out general facts. Who are the owners of the property? Who is the applicant? How do you describe the property? What is the zoning? What's the address of the property? What are the characteristics of the property? These are things that, you can't argue over. They are facts. And then specific findings relative to criteria of approval. These are taken from a decision from years ago in Staten, so these don't reflect necessarily any approval criteria you have in your code, but just to provide an example of how you write findings to reflect the criteria for approval. This was on a apartment building that there were architectural standards in the code. So one of them dealt with trim and what the width of trim is around doors and windows, and the finding that the planning commission made is it's shown on the plan around the doors and windows, and it specifies a width of 4 inches. So another standard criterion about roof-mounted equipment, and the finding is no roof-mounted equipment is proposed. So let me give a little digression here and give an illustration of the difference between findings and conclusions. Findings could be something like, it's a sunny day, it's 70 degrees, there's a light wind out of the southwest. The conclusion is, it's a nice day. But that conclusion is based on your thinking that sunny and 70 degrees is nice, whereas someone else may think that, well, the weather we had here in the Willamette Valley today, where it was foggy and never got up to 40 degrees, is nice. So I have seen, and I make that distinction because I have seen what's presented as findings as saying that a standard will be met, not really facts that are presented in the application, or a finding that there will not be traffic congestion. That's a conclusion, not really a finding. So the conclusion ties the facts and the criteria together and expresses your judgment as to whether those criteria are met. And if you conclude that all of the criteria are met, then the decision to be made is an approval. And if your conclusion is that there are some criteria that are not met, then the conclusion should explain what needs to be done in order to meet those criteria, and that becomes the basis for a condition of approval. And here's an example of how that was handled elsewhere. Again, we had the facts laid out in a previous section of the order. Based on the facts of the above, Planning Commission concludes that the requirements have been met except for the following. And one of the standards required a certain minimum number of parking spaces, and this site plan did not include any bicycle parking spaces. The standard could be met if the site plan is revised to include a minimum of 11 bicycles parking spaces. Similarly, a section on having underground or drip irrigation. In this case, an irrigation plan was not submitted, but the planning commission concluded the standard could be met if an irrigation plan is submitted. And then those conclusions are reflected in the order, in the decision. And again, as an example of conditions of approval, the application is approved with the following conditions of approval. Prior to submitting an application for building permit, submit the following engineered plans. And those should all reflect these conditions of approval need to be reflected in the conclusions that there are criterion or criteria that have not been met. Finally, all of that is reduced to a notice of decision, usually provided within several days to the applicant and to any other party that participated in the hearing or other process. The notice needs to include the date the decision is effective, any conditions of approval, if there are next steps in the process, and what the appeal procedures and deadlines are. So what I like to call the 8 commandments for land use decisions. Here, parties must be notified of any proposed land use actions. We do that through notices that are mailed out. In some communities, signs or notices in a newspaper or posted at City Hall. Must be provided an opportunity to be heard. Decisions must be based on standards. Decisions must be based on all of the evidence. The applicant carries the burden of proof of showing that the criteria have been met. Quasi-judicial decisions must be made impartially. Ex parte contacts are prohibited, and again, I'll get into that in a little bit. And decisions must be supported by findings of fact. For the Planning Commission, all of your meetings must be open to the public. And a public meeting under state law, a public meeting occurs if there is a quorum of the Planning Commission and public business is discussed. So what happens if there's a social event and 4 of you are invited and are there? It is not a public meeting if there is no discussion or deliberation of public business. So you don't need to worry about, oh, we can't all go to the Elks Lodge Christmas party because someone will say that there's a secret meeting going on. If you don't discuss city business, it's not a public meeting. The statute requires that notice be given to the media and any interested parties not less than 24 hours before a meeting, and that there be a written agenda available, and that the meeting be held in a location that is a public location in this case, within the city, and it needs to be accessible to people with disabilities. All votes are public votes in an open session. The Planning Commission does not have a reason to have a discussion that would be covered as an executive session. So all of your votes need to be done in public, and all of your deliberations and discussions need to be done in public. And then finally, you need to have a set of written minutes that at bare minimum reflect who was there, what any motions and the results of all votes were, and include some reference to what the substance of discussion were, and any documents that were discussed or reviewed have to be referred to in the minutes.
And just for everyone, there's 5 or 6 more slides, so you guys can power through. I know it's a long meeting, and Dan, you can keep going. And I guess one other thing I wanted to note that Toledo will often do for planning commission or city councilors is a notice of a potential quorum if there's a event that's occurring in town. So those have been published in the past, as an example. But go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So earlier I mentioned several times ex parte contact. This comes into play for quasi-judicial decisions. As I've stressed before, quasi-judicial decisions must be based on information that's in the record. And if you have contact with somebody outside of the meeting room or who doesn't submit written testimony for the record, then that is considered ex parte contact. And, it's a small town, news gets around, you're at the grocery store, you run into somebody, or you're out raking the leaves on your lawn, and a neighbor comes down the street and says they've heard about a certain application that'll be before you. If you have ex parte contact, you are required to reveal that you had that contact and say what information you heard. And by doing so, you get that information placed on the record. And that gives other parties in the process the opportunity perhaps to rebut that information. Let me back up. It's still on ex parte contact. That would include driving by and doing your own sort of site visit, or maybe it's the property for which an application is received is on your daily commute, so you drive by 10 times a week. If you see information about the property during those opening remarks at the hearing, you should say, "Oh, hey, I drive by once a week. I saw there's this huge oak tree on the property," or "I drive by once a week and I haven't, I don't see anything of note." You just note that, get it on the record that you might have information available that's not part of otherwise on the record. Specifically, your planning commission, made up of 7 members, at least five of whom must reside inside the city, and 2 might be non-residents of the city. You serve 4-year terms. Each July, you select your own president and vice president, and there needs to be 4 members present and able to participate to have a quorum. Looking at Toledo's municipal code, you are given certain general powers to recommend and make suggestions to the city council about streets and traffic congestion, housing and sanitation, zoning, future growth, and economic development, and also very specific duties that spelled out there in Title II, that you are the decision authority for any exceptions to the zoning requirements, conditional use applications, and land divisions, and that you make recommendations to the council regarding comprehensive plan amendments, zoning text and map amendments, vacation of rights of way or land or and annexation. I think this is the last section of the presentation. ORS Chapter 244 is the state's ethics laws. It includes you all as a public official, and it prohibits you from using or attempting to use your position for financial benefit or gain to yourself or immediate family members. So that brings up the issue of conflicts of interest. And the statute makes a distinction between a potential conflict of interest, which is defined where your action could have a financial benefit or detriment to you or your family member or a business interest. And if you have a potential conflict of interest, and that could be that you live close enough to a development proposal that perhaps maybe the value of your home would be affected as to whether that development happens or not. But it's uncertain whether it would. Then you have an obligation to announce the potential conflict of interest. And after making that announcement, you may continue to participate in the process. And that's the distinction between a potential and an actual conflict of interest. And the actual conflict of interest is where the public action will have a financial benefit or detriment to the public official. Just to give the obvious example, one of you is the applicant. You may not participate in the decision. You must announce that actual conflict of interest and step down from the board. My advice has always been, don't just say I have a conflict of interest. You really should get up and get out from behind the table and go sit in the audience rather than just sit there and not participate. Also covered by the ethics law is your receiving gifts. There's a it only refers to gifts that you might receive from someone who has an interest in business before the Planning Commission. And it's a gift that you receive because you are a planning commissioner. So it does not apply to gifts you receive between family or friends that you're getting because they love you, but where there is an administrative or financial interest in the business that you do. And in that case, the statute establishes a maximum value of $50 during any single calendar year. And finally, the law requires that you do an annual filing of what's called a statement of economic interest. The city notifies the Oregon Ethics Commission of everybody that's been elected or appointed that's covered by this, and they contact you each spring, and you're required to complete that form no later than April something. I think it's April 14th or 15th of each year. So that wraps up my presentation. I know we've gone on quite a long time, but if you've got any questions, we'll do our best to answer them.
No, but that was very informative. I appreciate you guys doing that. Very helpful, I think. I thought so.
I was just trying to remember when McCall made the beaches state beaches, what year that was when we were, remember?
Was it 68 or 69?
That's what I was thinking, the late sixties.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Just when you were talking, when it all started, it just was so important. Yeah.
I think I like Dan's last reminder, because coming up on that quickly again, we'll be receiving that notice again. And yeah, I think overall the goal is that, yeah, we're able to see kind of the rules and processes again, not in the formal public hearing, almost as like a practice or reminder, because later this year, we don't have anything on the docket for February at this point, but when another conditional use or application comes to the planning commission, it's nice to kind of be like, oh yeah, I remember from that presentation what we mean by conflict of interest or ex parte contact. I think most often it's always been for ex parte contact, oh, I drove by the site because, you know, it's on the main road in Toledo. So that's kind of a common notice that we get in our meetings.
Cora stepped down, you stepped down on A Street.
Yeah, well, I didn't come to the meeting.
Yeah.
I had decided that it would be
Right.
better for me not to even be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any questions or?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, that was great.
And we have great staff. I just want to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that.
No, and this is kind of
That
why.
makes your life a lot easier.
It does, yeah, it's pretty easy over here, yeah.
Yeah, and I have some perspective, and like Dan said, yeah, over 30 years of land use perspective. So I think having him describe things like the weather example, I wrote that down so I could remember that in the future. But it's nice to kind of get another example
Yeah.
of how things could be described. If what it might not make sense if I describe it, but Dan did a good job, and Brett with the expert on the state rules and history there. So I think that's
Yeah, no, that was very good, yeah.
it looks like. Yeah, so it's up to you. We have a hand raised.
Oh, okay. Cynthia, did you have something else you wanted to say?
I do. I want to thank you all. I think that was one of the most informative things I've heard in years. And it sounds like everybody finally listened. And now it's time that we go ahead and start healing. So I really do. I feel so much better that at least we can go forward from here. And if it, like I say, if filtration and UV lights, and let's figure out what's going on with water and our environment. And, you know, we've got forestry issues. I just thank you for opening the door for the truth. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, if nobody else has any questions of our trainers, I guess we can move on to the next item.
All right.
Or does that work out okay?
Mhm.
The discussion items, updates and reports. I guess this would be you, Justin, right?
Yeah.
On that?
So this is a standard practice that Arlene kind of throughout the years putting together the building permit log. And so at the end of each year, and actually about mid-year in July, we submit this to the planning commission members as well. So it's meant to be kind of a notice of all the applications that have occurred in the city. So we kind of leave it open if there's questions, and then oftentimes it's that at the next meeting something comes up where you have a question on one of the items. So please take time to look at it. If you don't have a question today, we can answer those questions at the next meeting.
Can I add that that was a typo on the GP floodplain permit? It was boilers, or boilers. There was a typo.
Elders?
Yeah, that didn't make sense.
That was
I didn't even
spoilers.
see that. So that was pointed out earlier.
Yeah, and if there are no initial questions, yeah, take a look. Or if you drive by one of the sites and have a question later, we can answer those.
There's quite a few of them, it seems.
Mhm.
It's nice.
Yeah,
I can jump to the parks
yeah.
master plan update. As a reminder, we received a grant from the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department. So they have grants for master plans, and we're currently Oregon Cascades West is working on that process with the city. So there was the survey that went out that many of you may have filled out as a kind of one of the initial steps of public engagement. And I just wanted to report out that, so we worked closely actually with the school to get some juniors and seniors involved as well. So we ended up with over 200 responses from the survey, and we'll later in February, we'll have a presentation about the survey results in an open house, but it will break out like how many were under 18 versus other members of the community. So we'll be able to break out some of those stats for the planning commission and anyone else. And we're trying to work with the school too to encourage the juniors and seniors, especially that have filled out the survey, to come down and join for the open house portion of the meeting, because we'll have the presentation and then poster boards that are interactive as well. So that'll be part of the process. So there's continued public engagement beyond just the survey. And then the other part of that is we'll likely have the introduction put together and then the survey summary results memo. So those will be part of the packets. And that meeting will be a joint meeting with the city council as well. So it'll be
And you said that would be in February?
yeah, the February planning commission.
Oh, our February meeting.
Mhm.
Oh, okay,
Next week.
okay.
Were we gonna have a joint, there was some mention about a joint meeting with the city council, or did that happen and I missed it, or?
No, that will be the February.
That's gonna be the February,
Yeah.
okay.
And then we'll also talk about the traffic calming ordinance that was discussed last year and drafted. So those will kind of be the two main items.
And then the open house is later on in the spring, you were saying.
It'll actually, we will do other open houses later, but we're gonna kind of incorporate a presentation style at the beginning of the meeting and then open it up for like a full open house where everyone can kind of just
Oh, okay.
walk around the room and look at posters.
There will be I was just looking at my calendar and I hate to say I'm gonna actually physically miss that, but I could be on camera for that meeting.
Mhm.
That's on the 11th, right?
Yeah, that one's on the
February.
11th.
Yeah, I'm flying that day, so I think I'll be in Phoenix then. But I'd like to maybe participate, online.
Yeah, for the presentation aspect, that'll work really well. For the open house, not as well, but we'll keep, what we'll probably do, what we did with the comp plan is we kept some of the posters out. So if you wanted to come by the office later,
Okay.
yeah. I don't know how long you're gone, but if it's within a week.
I think I fly back home on the 15th or 16th, so
Okay.
I'll be back then that next week. I could maybe stop in,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah. And any other questions on the parks plan? And I guess the next grant project updates is actually related to the other parks. So there's kind of two types of grants, the planning grant and then the construction grant. So the construction grant, that's kind of been an ongoing process where the bathroom was built, and then the tennis courts were resurfaced at Arcadia Park, and there was actually some funding left over. So they're currently, they had dug up the old equipment, the playground equipment, and they're installing, because I think actually we received some comments about the playground equipment being dangerous, but that we were able, Public Works, I should say, And Brian was able to take some of that grant remaining and use it for parks equipment. So there'll be new, I haven't seen the pictures of it. Brian could show you a picture.
It looked like there was something new going up today.
Okay.
They've been having fun. I felt bad for them. They get started and here comes their rain.
Yeah, it's been, hopefully they can get a few dry days where they can get in there.
That's exciting though. I
Yeah.
like that idea
Yeah.
of that park having updated equipment.
Yes.
That's
It's needed
That's
for
gonna
many
be
years.
great. Yeah, that will be really good.
And then the only other grant updates was Safe Routes to School. So the signs have been up for a while now, but Public Works has actually been working on hard wiring those signs in because there was some struggle during the winter months, especially with the solar. So now they're hardwired in, so they're wrapping up that, and so that grant will be closed.
The ones on Sturtevant?
On Sturtevant, yeah, thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
I like those signs.
I have
Those
to
are
draw it
cool.
out.
Mhm.
In the Lincoln County Natural Hazards Plan, so that, if you remember, went to Planning Commission for a review and then went to City Council. It was approved locally, and then it's a county plan, so the county and then each city has to approve their portion by resolution. So that process, and we received FEMA approval back for that. So that's complete, and that's very important for future grants. If there's a disaster, we have to have this in place in order to get those disaster funds. So that's really the key piece of that in terms of the funding. But it's also really a good tool to review for Toledo if you have interest in some data around natural hazards in the local area. You can those addendums is what they call them for each city, but Toledo's is available on Lincoln County's website, and we'll have a link on the city website as well to go directly to that.
That would be great. Okay, that's all the updates you want to talk about. Just, are there any staff comments?
Do you have anything else that I missed? I feel like I usually miss one thing.
Okay, next thing is commissioner comments. I just have one thing, and I don't know if this is the place to even bring it up. And it's not a big deal, but you know, on the walking trail out there on the port, and when you go out on the paved area towards the railroad tracks, they're actually at the end of the paved area at the railroad tracks. There's all that, I guess I'm gonna say homeless garbage out there. I didn't know, I know that I thought Toledo had been pretty good at cleaning up, you know, when that kind of stuff happens, but I didn't know if anybody had seen that out there, or it's kind of right at the end of the trail, kind of on both sides of the trail
They've been
there.
out to the end in a long, long time.
Well, here I've been walking every day.
Yeah, we just.
And so I've been seeing that out there, and I thought, well, I would just ask the question if, I don't think anybody's there. I don't think it's an actual camp, but it's just like stuff that's been kind of, Justin, is that city left port?
Depending on where that's a good question. Depending on where it's located, it might be on the
Oh,
port
it might be on
property.
the port property?
But
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
at a minimum, what we can do is work with Arlene, and we could talk to Brian, so it gets elevated. And then if it's not city property, we can work with the port on the
You're
next
talking right
steps.
when you get to the railroad track.
Yeah, like right at the end of the pavement.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, if it's right there, because when you're on the port's part, the park there, that's all the port's property. But then towards the end, if it's near the right of way, yeah, I'll have to ask Brian in terms of where exactly it's located, in terms of whether or not it's port or city. But we can elevate that question.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, did anybody else have anything else that they'd like to say?
Enjoy the weather.
Yeah, I know, it's nice. Okay, well, I guess we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.